Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The United States is pressing Ukraine to accept a peace proposal with Russia, though Kyiv says the original 28-point plan demanded too many concessions, including ceding parts of Donetsk and Luhansk and reducing its military. Russia said its air defenses shot down nearly 250 Ukrainian drones during overnight attacks. In Taganrog, strikes damaged 2 apartment buildings, a private home, a college, 2 industrial sites, and a kindergarten, killing 1 person and wounding 3 others. US President Donald Trump says he held a very good phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping, describing US-China relations as extremely strong. Trump says they discussed Ukraine, Russia, fentanyl, soybeans, and other farm products. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and President Donald Trump held a phone call today, their first since Takaichi triggered a diplomatic clash with Beijing over comments suggesting Japan could respond militarily to China's attack on Taiwan. A U.S. federal judge dismissed criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, ruling that the prosecutor appointed at Trump's urging was illegally installed. Moscow and Beijing are exploring ways to increase Russian oil shipments to China. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said now China is currently importing about 1.4 million barrels per day by sea and 900,000 barrels per day via pipeline. The Trump administration officially designated the Venezuelan group Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist organization on Monday, even though questions remain about whether the group truly exists. Severe flooding in southern Thailand has killed 13 people and affected nearly 2 million, hitting 9 provinces including Surat Thani, Songkhla and Patani. Evacuations are underway in low-lying areas like Hatay with military and rescue teams deployed. And viewers, earlier today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that any revised peace plan must match the understanding reached between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump at their Alaska summit back in August. Speaking at a news conference in Moscow, Lavrov has said that Russia supported the initial version of the US proposal and is waiting for a new interim draft after Washington's consultations with Ukraine and Europe. Moreover, Lavrov has also added that Moscow would view the situation differently in their next version if the next version does not reflect the Alaska discussions. He has also stressed that Russia truly values the active role taken by the United States in seeking a path to settlement, contrasting with their other Western capitals. And Alison Matler, who's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, is joining us live from Bucharest. I extend a very warm welcome to you, Alison. Now, Alison, talks are being held in Abu Dhabi as of now. Do you see, and of course we know that Trump has held a very zigzagged point of view on Ukraine. Ukraine has maintained that the plan was originally as well tilted towards Russia's side. Now, with this statement of Lavrov, do we see this as a warning of sorts to Trump?
I think the Russians have come out very well from these negotiations with Trump. And also, I have to say, on their silence, they never react about anything unless they have something to say. And they played very cool this last week, whereas Trump has been very noisy. He said it has to be done by Thursday. He's shown his impatience with Ukraine. Then they changed their tune a bit. Then it was unclear whether this proposal was actually drafted by the Russians and quickly translated with AI into English, whereas the Russians have been very cool about it. The Ukrainians obviously have been more alarmed, as has the European leaders, and there's been a flurry of meetings and discussions, and those are carrying on. But Russia, let's make no mistake, is very interested in having its maximalist demands, which are not just, are not fair, reflected in a final peace settlement. They want more territory. They want Ukraine to be defanged its military. They want to reduce the troops. They want a ban on a veto on Ukraine joining NATO. And they want elections. They want Zelensky out as soon as possible. He has been a huge thorn in their side, and it's incredibly embarrassing to them that it's taken almost 4 years to capture so little territory. So they are very keen to push their demands with Trump as much as possible. Trump, not just Trump himself, but Witkoff and his people.
All right. Well, even as Russia and US are holding talks in Abu Dhabi, missiles are pounding Kyiv. And this, as Zelensky says, that he will hold discussions with Trump on sensitive issues.
Yes, I mean, Russia is underlining that it is a force to be reckoned with. Missiles rained down on Kiev last night, striking various targets. I think 6 were killed, and that's almost like a blip in this war. It's nothing. And even in in Romania, where I'm reporting for, we had the most serious violation of its airspace from Russian drones since the beginning of the war. 4 counties in Romania were affected. It was the first time ever that Russian drones had entered Romanian airspace in daylight. And in Moldova, neighboring Moldova, which is not a NATO or EU member, a Russian drone fell on a roof there. So Russia is really keeping the pressure up. They want to show the US that they are winning this war, which they are not, but they want to show it. They're wanting to show that they are aggressive. And from time to time, of course, they will always tell us that they have nuclear weapons. So they are showing force in almost in little ways by doing attacks which have nothing to do with their original plans, which is of helping the ethnic Russian minority, but also encroaching onto NATO airspace, such as Romania, Poland, Denmark, Belgium, and so on.
All right. Request you to stay on with us, Alison. Let's give our viewers some more information. Now, as well, all know that the United States and Ukraine have recently held productive talks on a possible deal to end Russia's war in Geneva. The White House has now officially commented on it, saying that only a couple of points still need resolution. The press secretary has further said that US President Donald Trump remains optimistic that an agreement can be reached. Let's listen in first.
And they were really able to fine-tune the points. And so now there are just a couple points of disagreement that our teams continue to work through. You know, President Trump stopped the funding of this war, but the United States is still sending or selling a big amount of weapons to NATO. We cannot do that forever. And the president wants this war to end. He is a peacetime president. That's what he's pursuing. And today he remains optimistic and hopeful. And I know our teams are working around the clock to try to get this deal to an end.
All right, let's bring back Alison into the discussion. Alison, what does Trump administration really mean when it says that weapons flow is now unsustainable?
I think, as his spokeswoman said, that Trump, okay, he has proved, as you said earlier, zigzagged, but he's generally been more pro-Putin than pro-Zelensky. That's without a question of doubt. But his overriding desire is not just to give a deal to Moscow, because he wants to come up top himself, but it's to end this war. But even when we saw the original peace plan, or we heard reports of it, which was, I think most media said it was a hot mess. I would say it was pretty amateur. He knew very well that Ukraine would not agree to many of these points, which is what scrambled the European leaders and Ukraine to come up with an alternative plan. And of course, he is a master negotiator. He's very well aware of that you can't just have Russia and the United States working over the head of Ukraine and of Europe. So he's realistic about that, but his key overriding desire is to have a peace settlement as soon as possible. Initially, he told Ukraine they basically had to surrender and agree to this peace plan by Thanksgiving, but that's now been softened out a bit. Marco Rubio said, well, it doesn't really matter if it's Wednesday, Thursday, next Monday, etc., etc. But it's clear for the United States that the timeline is short. Why I see the problem now is actually with Russia, because the Ukrainian European counter offer is apparently, far as we know, is nothing like the original one. And Russia is pushing for maximalist demands. They really are, and they're not going to agree to what Ukraine and Europe wants. So I don't know what's going to happen. Of course, Donald Trump will put more pressure on Zelensky, but that also he has to take into account Europe as well. We have some European leaders like Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who has a good relationship with Trump. So there are a lot of factors involved in this, and it's unclear whether they will be able to come to, it'll be a compromise, whether that will be possible, because the Russian maximalist demands really aren't just to Ukraine and not acceptable to Europe either. And not really a peace. They won't guarantee a peace, that's for sure.
So what's the best bet? What's the best deal that Ukraine can get out of this?
I think that the key things for Ukraine are its land, because I don't think they will cede land that Russia has painfully tried to conquer but has failed. I think they don't want a veto on them joining NATO. That doesn't mean they will join. That doesn't mean they will join NATO. It just means they don't want a veto. They don't want an outside country telling them they can't join NATO. So I think that's important. I don't think they want any obligation on another country telling them they have to hold elections in 100 days. They have to look at their own constitution when they have to hold elections. Why should Russia tell them when they have to hold elections? So I think those are sort of sticking points. But I'm sure Ukraine, whether it says so publicly or not, would agree to cede some territory, because Russia has conquered some territory. Particularly the Russians are interested in the east, where they have their own ethnic Russian minority, and also there are key mineral deposits the US are interested in. So there may be some leeway with that. Russia sort of threw an olive branch that Ukraine could join the EU. That again is a question for the EU, because the country is certainly not ready. But I don't think Ukraine will agree to Russia also telling it has to pare down its military. Maybe it would reduce it slightly, but not to the levels that Russia would want it. So there might be some leeway on those issues.
All right. Well, I'll leave you at that, Alison. Thanks for joining us and sharing your opinion with us here at NewsX World. With that, let's move on. Now, a new United Nations report has warned that the Palestinian economy has suffered an unprecedented collapse as a result of the two-year war in Gaza and sweeping economic restrictions. According to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, decades of socio-economic progress in the occupied Palestinian territory have been reversed due to widespread destruction of infrastructure, productive assets, as well as public services. Now, the report finds that by the end of last year, Palestinian GDP per capita had fallen back to 2003 levels, effectively wiping out 22 years of development gains. It describes the resulting economic crisis as one of the 10 most severely global since 1960. Conditions in the West Bank have also sharply deteriorated, with the region experiencing its most significant downturn on record. UNCTAD attributes this to heightened movement and access restrictions, along with a steep decline in economic opportunities across all sectors. And I want to welcome Ali Mohammed Abu Shbak, who's joining us from the Middle East. He's a researcher. Very warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us here on NewsX World. I just want to ask you first, how long is Palestine going to take to recover all these losses that it has occurred in the 2 years of war?
Oh, thank you for having me. The thing is about recovering, it will take a very long time. First of all, Israel's occupation, it's maintaining that their process and their policy to weaken the Palestinian Authority in West Bank, and also limited their rule in Gaza. especially we are talking about the conflict in Gaza and who's going to rule Gaza the day one after the second phase of negotiation between Hamas and Israel. Up to now, there is no agreement between between the Israel and several of countries who will rule Gaza, and about also the international forces that safekeeper. So the thing is about the economy, there is a several of action or policy that Israel deducted to weaken the Palestinians' economy in West Bank and as well as Gaza. 2 years of war, the devastation and destruction in on the ground, all the infrastructure and also the telecommunication infrastructure have been damaged. It will take a very long time in Gaza. In West Bank, Israel's also detains the Palestinians' taxes and fees. Under the umbrella of claim that the Palestinian Authority supporting the terrorists, because Palestinian Authority support some people who got lost and who casualties during this conflict. They consider it as supporting for the terrorists. Also in West Bank, there is a several of settlement also. Limited the Palestinians' economy to grow up more. We are talking also that all the Palestinians' economy it's following the Israelis' economy, and most of that things Israel prohibited for the Palestinians company to to sign or to agree with another company. Globally, for example, in communication, Palestinians should be take the service from Israelis economy. Sorry, for Israelis company, not from other international company like that communication companies. So also we are talking about the telecommunication technologies that's also prohibited development. Israel prohibited for this company to develop and to be more modern. So in Gaza there is a no 3G, and in West Bank there is a limitation for 3G. So all of these policy for on the ground prohibited for the Palestinian, not only economically, also society and also the political to grow up and to develop. This is for one aims. Israel try to insist to not let the Palestinian to establish their statehood and insist to there is no Palestinian statehood. On the ground there is a settlement. Also Israelis restriction on the mobility in West Bank, in Gaza. There is no borders. All the borders is closed. So this is a human-made crisis to limited the Palestinians and forced the Palestinians to flee their lands, because economy one of the significant tool for steadfast and stay in their stay in this land. So that's making the Palestinian to frustrated and leave this country and look forward another country to immigrate or to stay in. So it's a very clear the Palestinian economy will not recover very soon until unless the Israelis occupation is still on the ground and their policies still suffocated the Palestinian, not only economy but also about the human. There's no doubt about the war in Gaza, and everyone knows what's happening in Gaza and the Israelis' violation of the human rights and the human charities. So that's make it more incredible on the ground. I guess people more desperate, more frustrated. If you will talk about the poverty line, several of people in Gaza under the poverty line, and there is no one could secure their daily supplies in Gaza without any support or without any donation or without any aids from outside.
And now, given the downturn that the Palestinian and the West Bank region is facing, and with Israeli settlements there now demolishing the Palestinian homes, are the Israeli settlements going to be expanding there?
There is no doubt. This is a government, Benjamin Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir. I mean, they are feeding by settlement and by to violating the international law. As you know, since 2016, that United Nations Security Council considered the Israeli settlement in Palestinian territory is illegal. And since 2016 up to date, you can count how many thousands of Israeli settlement units have been established in Palestinian territories. That's make it the situation more, complicated, and that's prohibited for the Palestinian to establish their statehood. That's why they are fighting Palestinian. I guess they are fighting for for self-independence and for self-determination, not only because they are have some problem or issue with the Israelis the settler, but we have seen and observed a several of footage that how much the settler violated the human rights and how much they are violating the Palestinians it's the right the Palestinian territories without any right and under the cover of the Israeli soldier. So that's it make it more incredible, and I guess they are going to more extended. And Smotrich, he was very clear during the war in Gaza, and he said should be reestablished the Israeli settlement in Gaza, because you know in 2005, during the Ariel Sharon period when he was a prime minister in Israel, in 2005 Israel withdrew from Gaza. Here in settlement, but now Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they are supporting this idea and to settle Gaza and to be there is some Israelis settlement in Gaza. It's, at the point that Israel size up to now. So that's make it more difficult for the Palestinians to establish their statehood, and will increase the conflict, I guess, because here we are. The natural of this conflict is about the existence. Palestinians want to prove their existence on the ground, and Israeli want to prove their existence there in the land. But also from the Benjamin Netanyahu's government, they don't want to let the Palestinians establish their statehood. And he was very clear on media and in several of statements. He said, "I will not set the Palestinian statehood in the line 1967."
All right. Thank you for sharing that with us. But I requested to stay on as we have some more information to give our viewers from the area there. Now, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a U.S. and Israeli-backed group that distributed an aid outside traditional UN channels, has also announced that it is shutting down operations. The move follows months of criticism after hundreds of Palestinians were killed while attempting to reach its sites, many of which were placed far from population centers. GHF, which launched in May as a temporary emergency initiative, suspended work after the October 10 ceasefire. Executive Director John Ekry said in a US-led coordination center overseeing President Donald Trump's Gaza plan will now adopt and expand GHF's model. Despite receiving tens of millions in US funding, GHF has declined to reveal other donors. It says it delivered 187 million meals over 6 months, less than 1 meal a day for Gaza's 2 million people. Hamas has welcomed the closure, while the US State Department thanked GHF for its contributions. And I want to bring back Ali into the discussions here. Ali, now with the more and more help groups shutting down their operations, we do know that Palestinians are going to be moving out, but are these refugees going to be accepted by too many countries?
I guess about the GHF, it's a very complicated, because we have seen several of criticism about this their rule in Gaza, and we have seen on television, on the news, how many casualties have been killed during the collecting their aids from GHF, and it was a controversial rule in Gaza. Hamas used to claim that GHF it's used the Palestinian and civilians to recruit them against the Palestinian community and recruit them for collecting the information on the ground rather than the Israelis intelligence service work on the ground. So, and also we have seen Witkoff, he visit the GHF after the criticism of and lambasting the GHF. We have seen several of things happen on the ground. So I guess now it has no rule on. I mean, after if there is the international forces, it will come in Gaza and to monitor the ceasefire and the peace process on the ground. So GHF hasn't no any kind of rule in Gaza, and also should enhance the United Nations rule on the ground because it has a long experience about the stimulating the aid and disseminating the food for the civilians after more than 4 decades in Gaza. So it's working in on the ground, the United Nations. So GHF, it was a temporary time and it has a limitation of duty to do it in Gaza. So I guess now, I mean, closure this chapter, it's one of the significant point for America and Israel. And as you know that several of media and experts, they criticize their rule on the ground.
Thank you, Ali, for joining us for now and sharing that with us. We appreciate you giving us your time. And now, viewers, let's move on to another big story that we're tracking for you here at NewsX World. The Federal Aviation Administration has announced that it will send investigative letters to airlines that did not comply with flight reduction orders at 40 major U.S. airports during the government shutdown. FAA administration and Administrator Brian Bedford stated that airlines failing to reduce capacity as required to address air traffic control safety concerns will be investigated. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy emphasized that airlines must follow FAA directives, warning of accountability for non-compliance. Although the FAA initially sought a 10% reduction in domestic flights, the requirement was later lowered to 6% and then 3% before being lifted entirely on November 16. Despite these orders, data from aviation analytics firm Cirium revealed that airlines largely failed to meet the reduction goals. By the end of the shutdown, only 0.25% of flights were cancelled, far below the 3% threshold. Airlines may face fines of up to $75,000 for each flight that exceeds the mandated limits. The flight